Hello, everybody, and welcome to our weekly update. I'm Jax James. I just realized it says Texas NORML Executive Director, which is accurate. But today I am here as NORML's State Policy Manager to go over moving and new legislation that is going on across our country. I know if you tune in weekly, you understand that we highlight either things that have moved in the last week or things that have been filed in the last week, and it doesn't necessarily cover 100% of all the bills. So I always encourage anyone who is tuned in and watching to go to norml.org/act. You'll see a dynamic map there. You can hover over your state, and then you'll be able to see what active bills have been filed in your state. So we've got some really good highlights this week. And then what I'll do is I'll come to the comments per usual, and I'll see where you guys are watching from. And then that way I can delve in a little bit more into what's going on in your state. So as you're watching, make sure you drop in the comments where you're watching from, and I will come back to those once I get through our update for today. So if you'd like to follow along, of course, the link to our blog is posted in the description of this stream. But the first item I want to talk about is what's going on in New Hampshire. Now, there are two bills in New Hampshire, HB 639 for legalization. It would allow for 21 and up to purchase, possess, and gift up to 4 ounces of cannabis. It would be a state-run retail system where the Liquor and Cannabis Commission would be responsible for regulating the marijuana market and issuing business licenses. Further, localities could limit or ban marijuana businesses from operating in their area. Within 18 months from enactment, the State Department of Health and Human Services and the Commission must develop regulations allowing existing medical cannabis dispensaries to apply for dual licenses to start serving consumers. So that's HB 639. Then in New Hampshire, there's also HB 360, which legalizes the possession and use of cannabis for those 21 and up by striking basically all of the current references to cannabis in the state's Controlled Drug Act. Now, the update here is both of bills, New Hampshire's HB 639 and HB 360, have previously passed the members of the House of Representatives. However, yesterday's members of a state Senate committee voted 3-2 against the measure. Nonetheless, both of these bills will still move to the Senate floor for a full vote despite this procedural defeat. So if you are in New Hampshire, you know that legalization has come out of the House and headed to the Senate to die a couple of sessions in a row now. We really need everyone to reach out to their senator and especially Governor Sununu and let them know that you support this effort to legalize cannabis in New Hampshire. Now, talking about Pennsylvania, some bills were filed in Pennsylvania, HB 1080, which would allow 21 up to possess, consume, cultivate, and purchase cannabis through a state-run store system run by the Liquor Control Board. Retail cannabis sales would be taxed at 19%, and all of that revenue would go to the state general fund. The bill would also create a distinct regulatory scheme for industrial hemp. So we do support legalization, but of course we do have some issues with the state-run store system, so we are asking for that bill to be amended. HB 1082 further establishes a permitting process for commercial farmers to cultivate cannabis for the legal marketplace. So if you live in Pennsylvania, those are two legalization bills that you can participate in supporting. Now, in Vermont, there is a medical access bill that we're tracking called HB 270, which increases the number of plants that patients can cultivate at home, allowing for 6 mature and 12 immature plants. The bill increases the maximum allowable THC content in a single edible cannabis product from 50 to 100, expands the list of qualifying conditions, increases the number of patients a caregiver may provide services to, and removes the annual registration fee for qualifying caregivers. So in Vermont, HB 270 has passed the House of Representatives. It also passed the Senate Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. It's scheduled for a hearing today before the Senate Committee of Finance. So definitely make sure that you reach out to your senators if you live in Vermont. Now, I want to cover a bit of additional legislation before we get into some bills that have been enacted, and then I come back to y'all's comments to see where you're watching from. So in Florida, HB 387 allows medical marijuana patients to renew physician certification through telehealth. The Senate version of the bill also expands licensing opportunities to social equity candidates. Versions of this bill, HB 387, have passed both the Florida House and the Florida Senate. Now, the differences have to be worked out between what both chambers passed in something called a conference committee. And after that, the bill will head to the governor's desk. So definitely participate in that action alert there. Several updates in Maine. LD 555 amends the existing home cultivation limits. Under the measure, adults would be able to cultivate up to 6 mature plants, 12 immature plants, and an unlimited number of seedlings. The update here is that LD 555 has passed the House Committee of Veteran Legal Affairs, and it's been assigned to carry over to any special session. It was even scheduled for a work session just 2 days ago. Now, legislative document 1647 in Maine creates provisions prohibiting certain employers from discriminating against workers based solely on a positive test for the presence of marijuana metabolites. This bill was discussed in the House Judiciary Committee in Maine, but members have yet to vote on the issue, so it is pending there. Now, in Missouri, Senate Bill 189 establishes clinics to assist those in need with the process of seeking expungement for applicable crime charges and convictions involving cannabis. Of course, expungement can be a somewhat complicated process, and so these clinics are extremely helpful for making sure that people are able to take advantage of this opportunity. So in Missouri, SB 189 has passed the Senate and the House Administrative passed the Senate chamber and the House Administrative Oversight Committee. Now, in Nevada, we've got AB 411, which allows doctors to administer non-smoked formulations of medical marijuana to patients in certain hospitals, skilled nursing facility, or in hospice care. AB 411 passed the Nevada House 29-13 and is currently pending a vote in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Now, an interesting bill out of Ohio, SB 26, we've talked about this bill before, and what it does is it amends traffic safety laws so that those with trace levels of THC in their system can no longer be convicted of operating a motor vehicle while under the influence without further evidence of impairment. So under existing law, persons are guilty of a traffic safety violation if they operate a vehicle with even trace amounts of THC in their blood or THC metabolites in their urine, even absent any demonstrable evidence of impairment. Because both THC and particularly THC metabolites can be detected for days or weeks post-abstinence, long after any impairing effects have worn out, the current law criminalizes virtually anyone who has consumed cannabis in any of the recent past, and state-authorized medical cannabis patients especially. So while SB 26 doesn't do away with these unscientific limits altogether, which is what we would prefer, it allows those charged under the statute to present evidence in court that they were not impaired and posed no legitimate traffic safety threat. By making such a change, impairment would simply be inferred, but the limits would no longer be per se. Consequently, those defendants who provide evidence in court that they were not impaired to drive would be found not guilty, regardless of the THC level in their blood or urine. Now, in Pennsylvania, we've got House Bill 1079, and this provides employer reimbursement to medical marijuana patients up to $250 a month or a maximum of $3,000 a year for their cannabis medication to be distributed quarterly. So that's a newly filed bill in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to come back over to the comments here in just a second to see what states y'all are watching from. But first, I want to talk about some bills that have been enacted. And the first one is in Maryland. So as you guys recall, last November, Maryland. Why is Maryland a tongue twister right now? voters in Maryland enacted a legalization referendum, and that sent it back to the legislature to create the regulatory structure. So Senate Bill 516 regulates cannabis for adults 21 and up, allowing select cannabis businesses to serve medical and adult patients. The bill creates an avenue for on-site consumption licenses, where people can therefore purchase and consume in a social setting. The legislation institutes certain parental and personal protections for medical and adult consumers. The bill further increases the amount of cannabis registered medical patients can possess to up to 4 ounces of flower, 36 grams of THC-infused products, and up to 4 plants for home cultivation. This bill has been signed by the governor and is enacted into law. Additionally, in Washington state, SB 5123 makes it unlawful for an employer to discriminate against a job applicant solely based on their off-the-clock cannabis use away from the workplace. This bill passed both the chambers and has been signed by the governor and is now enacted into law. Some important protections for cannabis consumers. And of course, for both of those bills that have recently been enacted, I've got links to blog posts explaining more about those in today's update. So that is the list of bills that I wanted to go over with you guys today. Let me come back over here to the comments and see where you guys are watching from so that we can go over what is happening near you. Now, if you happen to see this later, or maybe we don't get into the full details of your state, I did want to let you know, you can always go to normal.org/act. And you'll see that dynamic map there. You just hover over your state. And if the legislative session is going on and there are cannabis related bills, you'll see a full list of them there for what you can participate in. For example, in my state of Texas, when you hover over there, there's 20 some odd bills and there are action alerts there that you can participate in to support that legislation. All right, so let's see where y'all watching from today. Okay. Virginia. So Virginia had some enacted legislation that you'll find at the bottom of the page there, mostly having to do with synthetic cannabinoids and medical improvements. But currently there is not a session happening with Virginia. It has already come to a close. Let's see about Georgia. I believe Georgia's session is over, but let me just double check. Yes, Georgia's session actually ended at the end of March. So no current moving legislation in Georgia. Let's see who's next. New Hampshire. All right. So you guys got to see the update that I had there for you. There's also a patient home cultivation bill that has been held over for the next session, and that can be something that you support as well. So in addition to really needing to reach out to your senator and Governor Sununu about legalization, definitely participate in that action alert as well. California. Now, California's got several moving bills. Let's see. My handy dandy spreadsheet says there is legislation in California having to do with equity, cannabis consumables like food and beverages, paying for seniors, and cannabis lounges. So definitely go to normal.org and hover over California so you can participate in all of those action alerts. North Carolina. We've got several bills here in North Carolina having to do with medical cannabis, legalization, decriminalization, and then one bill that actually has to do with adult use and medical together. So those are some bills that you can participate in there. It looks like it's been about a little under a month since any of these bills have moved. So definitely hearing from constituents might help get those to be moved out of committee. So I encourage you to participate in those. Tennessee. It looks like Tennessee's session ended just last week. So unfortunately, there is no current legislation for you to participate in from Tennessee. I've got someone from Ohio. Now, we talked about the per se bill in my update, but I am wondering, is there another one? Looks like that is the only currently filed bill in Ohio that we have an action alert on. So definitely participate in that link there. Okay, Pennsylvania. I did go over the fact that there is the new legalization bills there, but there are some other bills. One addressing DUI, adding edibles to the medical program, medical cannabis reimbursement, and legalization. So those are the 4 bills or the 4 topics that you can support in Pennsylvania. Let's see. So I see someone talking about wanting to have a chapter in their state. And I did want to let you guys know that if you go to NORML.org and you click on that chapters tab right there, you can see if there is a local chapter near you. And if there's not, we've got a link that will show you how to start a chapter in your area. So I definitely encourage anyone who's watching to participate in your state or local chapter, because they are likely doing some important work and are linked into what's going on there. So I don't see any other states tuned in right now, but if you happen to be watching this later, or you just haven't been able to drop your state in time, go to norml.org/act, hover over your state on that dynamic map, and you'll be able to see any legislation going on in your state. Also, I wanted to remind everybody that there's several federal action alerts on that page that you can participate in as well. Definitely some movement and some stuff going on at the federal level. So on that note, I will thank everyone so much for watching today, and I look forward to being back here with you next Wednesday to discuss what is going on across our nation whenever it comes to cannabis law reform. So take care, everybody.